customers will love those.
It's a lip smacker. Do I get a yum for that?
Yeah! What did you do?
I just Coles Freshed it.
Oh.
She just keeps it Coles Fresh. Coles Fresh this, Coles Fresh that.
Lovely.
A little better this and a little fresher that. Every day tastes a little better fresher with Coles Fresh.
Now that's Coles Fresh.
Fly Scoot. Save loot. There are rules about what you see on TV. The industry association ASTRA has developed codes of practice covering programming on subscription television channels like this one. To see the codes, visit the ASTRA website at astra.org.au.
Travelling or living overseas, now you can take us with you. Australia Channel is news, sport, business, top stories and public affairs, live and on demand, on desktop, mobile and tablet. Register now at australiachannel.com.au.
Our top stories on this Tuesday morning. A Melbourne man has been charged after allegedly trying to join in the fight against Islamic State in Iraq. The Immigration Department and Federal Police have released a statement saying the 28-year-old was preparing to leave Australia last December to fight with Kurdish-aligned forces. The man was arrested yesterday and is expected to face Melbourne Magistrates Court. Australian actress Maggie Kirkpatrick has been charged with historic child sex offences. The 74-year-old is best known for playing Officer Joan Ferguson in the hit show Prisoner and has also starred in Home and Away and Hey Dad. Victorian police officers have charged her with 2 counts of indecent assault and 1 count of gross indecency with a person under the age of 16. News Corp reports the charges relate to an alleged incident back in the 1980s involving a 13-year-old girl. New South Wales Premier Mike Baird is set to announce an audit into prayer groups at state schools after it emerged a Sydney student had been preaching Islamic extremist ideology in the playground. News Corp reports the same high school, Epping Boys in the city's northwest, once allowed a well-known Muslim extremist to preach to students. The audit will cover programs of all religions, with Mr Baird vowing that extremism will find no foothold in our schools and communities. The Prime Minister's warning of a potential $60 billion cost for Labor's plan to increase renewable energy to 50% by the year 2030. Opposition Leader Bill Shorten says 50% is an ambition and won't be mandated. He says Tony Abbott is trying to distract from his own lack of plans for tackling climate change. Mr Abbott's also hit out at Labor's plans for an ETS, saying it should be called an electricity tax scam. The US President has challenged key African ally Ethiopia on its democratic record. Barack Obama is on the first trip by an American president to Ethiopia, which is a close strategic partner for Washington, but a country criticised for its rights record. Speaking with talks with the Prime Minister, Mr Obama gave the blunt message that the country needed to perform better on basic rights. In sport, Chris Rogers appears certain to play in the third Ashes Test at Edgbaston tomorrow night after overcoming the dizzy spells which plagued him at Lords. And a look at the weather: rain and storms in the west, cool with a few showers in the southeast, mostly sunny in the east.
Live, this is AM Agenda with Kieran Gilbert.
Good morning and welcome to the program today. The renewed debate about renewable energy. The Prime Minister says Labor's plan will cost $60 billion. Labor argues its plan for 50% renewables by 2030 is not mandated like the renewable energy target. Therefore, the Prime Minister's numbers are wrong. With me this morning, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Alan Tudge, and also Labor frontbencher Matt Thistlethwaite. Gentlemen, good morning to you. Matt, is this what you get when you don't release all the detail when you announce a policy?
Well, Kieran, the Prime Minister's made this figure up. And how can you trust a bloke who lied to the Australian public when he said there'd be no cuts to health and education, no changes to pensions, no cuts to the ABC and SBS? So that's the first point. He's made this figure up. But what Labor's done is consistent with having a target, is consistent with what other developed nations are doing. The United States, China and Europe have all got ambitious targets for the uptake of renewable energy within their economies. And what we do know is that the more renewable energy you deploy into your system, the price of electricity comes down over time, because the fuel, sunlight and wind, is free. So once the technology is established, the cost of electricity will come down over time. That is confirmed in the government's Warburton review. It's been confirmed by Malcolm Turnbull yesterday. That's why we know Labor's plan will work.
OK, I want to play you the comments of the individual and the organisation that came up with the numbers that the Prime Minister was referring to. He was on the PM Agenda program yesterday.
$60-odd billion estimate is really just quite a simplistic estimate based on capital cost of wind technology that would be required to get us there.
OK, there you heard the analysis from the group that did the modelling. Alan Tudge, your reaction to that?
Well, you heard from the man himself. I mean, that was an estimate from a respected consulting firm who said that the cost of Labor's scheme would be in the vicinity of $60 billion. Now, when they introduce this scheme, someone would have to pay for it, and that would be the consumer in the end. And what it will end up being is higher electricity prices. And so Labor now has a commitment for higher electricity prices through a 50% renewable energy target by 2030. No underlying costs, no analysis gone into that, as well as their reintroduction of a carbon tax. So it's a double whammy for consumers coming should Labor be elected again. Now that means that the next election there'll be a very clear-cut decision for people to make. Do you want higher electricity prices under Labor, or do you want to continue under the coalition in trying to reduce electricity prices?
Kieran, can I just respond to that?
Yeah, but you heard also the ASIL. Yeah, you can in a second, Matt. Just one tick, because Alan Tudge, the ASIL chief who did the modelling in the first place, says it was on the back of an envelope and based on Labor committing to a 50% renewable energy target, which is not what they're doing. It's not going to be mandated. This is an ambition.
Well, that's different to even some of the social media posts which some of the Labor candidates are putting out. I was just looking at one last night which said that Labor will commit to to 50% renewable energy by 2030. Share the good news, it says. That's what the social media posts say by Labor candidates. Now, Labor should be fair income, they should be transparent, they should tell the Australian public what this commitment will do to their electricity bills, because unlike what Matt Thistlethwaite says, this isn't going to be free. This will be in the vicinity of a $60 billion hit to Australian taxpayers, to Australian electricity consumers. And the Australian Labor Party should at least be transparent and upfront about how much higher electricity prices will be under this policy.
OK, Matt Thistlethwaite, your response to all of that, and I guess the other question is the target simply a pie-in-the-sky target if you're not going to bind it, or have it mandated like a renewable energy target, which both sides have agreed on?
Well, the target is consistent with what other nations are doing and setting an ambition for the amount of renewable energy that they want in their economies over time. But the earlier guest that you showed, the $60 billion figure he admitted is a back-of-the-envelope calculation, and it makes a very basic assumption that the cost of renewables technology will remain the same over time, and that won't be the case. It's like the cost of cars. They've come down over time as technology has developed, and the same will be the case for renewable energy. And once you've got that establishment,
what will the figure be, Matt? What will the figure be?
Once that's been established, you actually reduce prices because the fuel is free. Now, you can't say that with coal-fired power. You've got the cost of coal as a fuel to fire up a turbine and produce electricity. But with solar panels, with wind turbines, over time, the cost is reduced because the fuel is free. The other point that I wish to comment on is Alan's comment that this is a carbon tax. It is not a carbon tax. An ETS is not a carbon tax, and we will never accept that. There is a clear difference. An ETS sets a cap on emissions, and those with a liability, those big companies, predominantly coal-fired power generators, have a choice. They can install new technology to reduce their emissions, or they can buy a permit. That is not a tax.
Kieran, two quick
And this
points
is
on this.
something that Alan touched. You can wait a second. The Communications Minister yesterday said, and you know Malcolm Turnbull's knowledge of this area. He says that if the emissions trading scheme and the renewable energy plan is a tax, so too is the renewable energy target. Therefore, the coalition government's already got a tax of its own, according to Mr Turnbull.
Well, I don't think you quite said that, Kieran, but I think Matt Thistlethwaite should listen to Joel Fitzgibbon, who effectively belled the cat on this and said that a floating price, an ETS, is a carbon tax. That's what he said. Can I just pick up Matt Thistlethwaite on one other point that he made? He suggests that renewable energies are free, that there's no ongoing cost. Well,
no, I said
if that was the case,
Alan, the fuel, not the renewable technology, the fuel.
If that was the case, then we wouldn't need to be providing subsidies to renewable energy today. We wouldn't need to mandate a target because the market would take care of it. The fact of the matter is renewable energy is still far more expensive than other forms of energy, which is why we do have to have these mandated renewable energy targets to provide effectively as subsidies for it. And what Labor's trying to do is to set this very ambitious target by 2030, which will massively put up the cost of electricity on top of their proposed carbon tax bill.
Now, Alan Tudge, you were questioning the Turnbull comment. I just want to put it exactly to you. Whether it's a regulation, this is a direct quote, whether it's a regulation, whether it's an RET, an emissions trading scheme or carbon tax fixed price, all of these can be seen as a cost on the business of generating energy and therefore a cost on households purchasing energy and therefore, in that sense, a tax. So he's included in that the renewable energy target, of which the government has bipartisan support. So you're already supporting a carbon tax, according to the senior Liberal frontbencher.
I don't think the renewable energy target is a tax. In essence, what it does is it requires all of us to consume a certain proportion of our electricity in the form of renewables. At the moment, that is now set at 23.5% by 2020. That's what our policy is. A tax is when you've got a charge for consumption, and that's what the carbon tax was under the Labor government. That's what the ETS would be because it would be a floating charge on consumption. It would be a charge which would start at whatever price, $23 as it was last time, and continue to go up according to Labor's own modelling when they were in government.
All right, let's take a break. Back in just a moment with Matt Thistlethwaite and Alan Tudge.
Coles fresh this, Coles fresh that. A little better this and a little fresher that. Every day tastes a little better fresher with Coles fresh.
I mean, you got to be proud of those, don't you? That's Coles Fresh.
Coles fresh this.
Every day, our team asks themselves the very same question. Is it Coles fresh enough?
I'd buy that.
Every day tastes a little better fresher with Coles fresh.
That's Coles Fresh. Look at all this.
Customers will love those.
It's a lip smacker. Do I get a yum for that?
What did you do?
I just Coles freshed it.
She just Coles fresh this, Coles fresh that.
Lovely.
A little better this and a little fresher that. Every day tastes a little better fresher with Coles fresh.
Now that's Coles Fresh.
What would you like to live on after you've gone?
Generosity.
My father's legacy.
Compassion.
Australians from all walks of life have found a way to continue their commitment to help others by including a charity in your will.
Your kindness.
Protection.
Community spirit.
Will live on. Find out how to include a charity in your will. Visit the website or ask your solicitor when you update your will.
Fly Scoot on our all-new smoother and faster Dreamliner fleet and experience 68 amazing destinations across Asia for work, rest and play. Scoot's helping Australians save in the air so you can spend when you're there with amazing low fares like Sydney and Melbourne to Singapore from $219, Perth to Singapore from $149 and Gold Coast to Singapore from $199. Start dreaming and planning your next trip to Asia today at flyscoot.com and take advantage of these amazing low fares. Fly Scoot, save loot.
Martin is the not-so-fast food type. happy to sit back and wait for his own gourmet creation. Create your taste. How very un-McDonald's.
Wake up, you sleepyhead. Get up, get out of bed. Cheer up, this sun is red. Live, love, laugh and be happy.
You don't have to stop at toast when you start with Vegemite.
Right now, with Coles Insurance, if you're 30 or over, you're guaranteed to save when you switch your comprehensive car insurance to Coles Car Insurance. To find out how much you could save, jump online or call today.
You know what the problem is?
Why would we do it?
No, listen. It's just time for listening. Every week when I come here, I'm miserable. You put me off. Do you know that? But I do brighten up when I get the opportunity to embarrass you.
On
Richard
and Jones.
This is AIM Agenda. Thanks for your company. With me, Labor frontbencher Matt Thistlethwaite and Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Alan Tudge. Alan Tudge, what do you think of Mike Baird's idea for uniform national laws and regulation on political donations? He's worried that if you have tough laws, for example, as they do in New South Wales, following their ICAC problems in the lead up to the last election, that you might have great and tough disclosure laws in one jurisdiction, but if you don't in all jurisdictions, then these sorts of donations can still happen, but go through other party infrastructure. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, as you know, Kieran, most of the donation laws are governed by state legislation, and so you do have different laws state by state. Now, to date, I don't believe there's been a proposal put to COAG seeking to make those laws uniform, but should it be done so, then COAG would consider that, and I think that all governments have an interest in trying to constantly improve our donation laws to make them more transparent, while at the same time giving people the opportunity to rightly provide donations to political parties or individual candidates' campaign funds should they choose to do so.
And because, Alan Tudge, the underlying principle here is that the parties aren't publicly funded, that they are privately funded entities. They receive some public funding, but overall they still need quite a lot private funding in terms of their operation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there is some public funding already for political parties based on how many votes you receive in the previous election. But by and large, most political campaigns are funded by private funds. And one of the alternatives which some people propose is that they should be completely publicly funded. Now, I'm not convinced that the Australian public would necessarily support that, because I'm not sure if they want to be providing the public funds to political parties to run political ads and to put mail in their letterboxes. And personally, I actually think that it is part of the political expression, if you like, is the ability for individuals to be able to contribute some of their funds towards political parties.
That's the balancing act here, isn't it, Matt Thistlethwaite, between the regulation but also still allowing the flow of private funds to organisations like the Liberal Party and the ALP.
That's right, Kieran. You can't completely have a publicly funded system, because there's an implied freedom of political communication in our Constitution. That's been confirmed by the High Court. So you do need to allow some form of individuals and corporations showing their support for political parties through donations, but it's about getting the balance right. And I think at the federal level at the moment, the disclosure threshold of $13,000 is way too high. So someone can donate $12,999 to a candidate or a political party and not have to disclose that, and the politician no longer has to disclose that either. That's way too high. That should be reduced to around $1,000. You get greater transparency, accountability, and you reduce the opportunity for corruption in our political system. And I just don't think you're going to get that political will under Tony Abbott.
Okay, your response before we move on to other issues, Alan Tudge. Why doesn't the government enable a lower disclosure limit to be set?
Well, each state has differing disclosure limits, and Sometimes people don't want to be on the public record for donating to a political party because they get concerned about the repercussions on them, particularly from the union movement, should they be seen to be donating towards a Conservative party. Now, this is always up for discussion. This is always debated and discussed between the political parties. There's been several parliamentary inquiries into what the right disclosure threshold should be. At the moment, as Matt says, federally, I think it is in about $12,000 or $13,000. Some have suggested lower, some have suggested slightly higher, but this will be an ongoing topic of discussion.
Let's wrap up with a discussion on the issue of same-sex marriage. Matt, Thistlethwaite, there was a move, of course, at the ALP conference to basically establish a conscience vote for this term and the next term of Parliament, but beyond that, to bind Labor MPs. Now, Scott Morrison has said in response to that that it's now makes a mockery of the suggestion that Bill Shorten and others are making that there's pressure on Tony Abbott to allow a conscience vote when you clearly don't share that principle, with a binding vote looming for Labor MPs.
Well, Kieran, we do have a conscience vote until 2019. So for the next period of time, for the next 4 years, there's a conscience vote in the Labor Party. So the claim that Scott Morrison is making that it's not a free vote in the Labor Party is absolutely ridiculous. The only party in our political system at the moment that doesn't offer its MPs a free vote, a conscience vote on the issue of same-sex marriage and marriage equality is Tony Abbott and the Liberal Party. And if we're going to get on with this issue, and we should, Tony Abbott needs to change his mind and offer his parliamentarians a free vote on marriage equality.
But doesn't it confuse the argument, the fact that Bill Shorten even said on Sunday morning to the ALP conference, to the conference floor, he said, if we're going to, ask for a free vote and tolerance from the government, surely we need to implement the same, and you have, but you put a deadline on it.
Well, we have, yeah, that's right. We've got a free vote in our party for the next 4 years, and I think what that reflects is the fact that society, Australian society, is moving towards, and certainly does favour, I think the latest published polls indicate about 70% of Australians support marriage equality. And we believe that it will be achieved in the coming years. Certainly if Labor is elected to government, it will be achieved, we believe, in our first term. And I think that that's a good demonstration that Labor now has a free vote on this issue. We'll do so for the next 4 years. It's the Liberal Party that needs to get its act together.
I mean, do you lose your conscience
Tudge,
after 4 years, do you, Matt? I mean,
well,
Matt, this
debate has sparked another round of criticism and questions from your own colleagues, though. One of your colleagues had said to me recently that if the Prime Minister doesn't allow a conscience vote, he'll be back to where he was in January of this year in terms of doubts about his ability to listen to his colleagues. So there might be the right, or the hard right, as some describe it, urging him not to move on this. But you well know there are some of your colleagues, including one of your Melbourne colleagues, Josh Frydenberg, who's openly said he believes there should be a conscience vote and supports legalising same-sex marriage.
There certainly are many people in the coalition party room who want a conscience vote, but ultimately it's up to the party room to make that determination whether we have a party vote or a conscience vote. That will be discussed at some stage in our party room, and a decision will be made in relation to that. Bear in mind that under the Liberal Party, in some respects, every single vote is a conscience vote because you are able to cross the floor should you choose. But even on this one, you can cross the floor and you won't be expelled from the Liberal Party. Unlike in the Labor Party, and this is the key difference, once the Labor Party goes to a formal binding vote again in 2019, if any single member crosses the floor, they will be expelled from the Labor Party. That means that you can be a deeply conservative member of the Catholic Church, and you will not be able to adhere to your faith should you believe that that governs your decision in relation to same-sex marriage. That means if you could be a Muslim or perhaps a conservative Jewish person and may not be able to vote according to your deep faith for fear of being expelled from the Labor Party.
You can't either, can you? A front bench member of the Liberal Party, if you cross the floor, you'd lose your job.
Well, my point is that within the Liberal Party, if you are certainly a backbencher, you can cross the floor and you won't be expelled from the Liberal Party. Every vote in that sense is a matter of conscience. Of course, we don't encourage people to do so. If you're a member of the government and there's a government party position, then of course you can't cross the floor without resigning from Parliament. Sorry, without resigning from your position.
Do you think that the Prime Minister's trying to delay any consideration of this matter by considering a plebiscite? Channel 7 reported last night that in discussions the PM has been raising the prospect of a vote, a referendum on this, like they saw in Ireland. Is this just a delaying tactic?
It's not a delaying tactic. I haven't had that discussion with the Prime Minister. I know that there's many discussions within our party room, but at the moment we have a party position, and that is the position that the Liberal Party has had since its formation, that marriage is a union between a man and a woman. The Labor Party has a different position. If we are to change that position, that will be a decision for our party room.
All right, Matt Thistlethwaite, let me go to you on that. Is a plebiscite, does it make sense to do that, to have a vote, a popular vote, if this is being canvassed by the Prime Minister with senior colleagues? Wouldn't it be good to get the popular vote on this like they did in Ireland?
I don't believe that we need a plebiscite, Kieran. I think Parliament's abrogating its responsibility really there. There's a clear majority of Australians believe that it's time for marriage equality in our community. It's something that I support, it's something that I will vote for. We can get there, I believe, in this term of Parliament if the Prime Minister allows his MPs a free vote on this issue. And Alan's indicated that the front bench can't exercise a free vote on this issue, so their hands are tied. But also I believe that many of those backbenchers would be afraid to exercise their views against the view of the Prime Minister on this issue. So I think it goes further than the Liberal Party's front bench. But again, if the Prime Minister allows a free vote, I believe that we will get there in this term of Parliament, and he can do it in the coming months because Warren Entsch and Terry Butler have got a bill that they're going to bring before the Parliament. We can get on with the job.
Let's take, well, we're out of time, gentlemen. It's time for me to take a break. Matt Thistlethwaite, Alan Tudge, appreciate it, gents. We'll see you soon. A quick break, back in just a moment on AM Agenda.